is this uncircumcised Philistine that defies the army of God? Isn't that a cool line? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that should defy the army of God? That's one of my favorite lines in one of my favorite stories. Why would this teenage shepherd boy, why would he be so bold? Why would he say such a thing? And, you know, I feel like whenever I preach, that I preach so much about perspective. But man, this story is absolutely ate up with perspective. It's all about perspective. Here's the deal. Here's what's happening. The Philistines has invaded Judah. Okay, they're where they're not supposed to be. So the Israelites has gathered their army together, and they're going to fight the Philistines. And here's what happens. 1 Samuel 17:3-11. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side with the valley in between them. We could say it's kind of like this sanctuary. We got the Philistines and we got the Israelites, and there's a valley in between them. And the champion went out from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath, from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And he had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, "Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistines said, "I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Wow. Okay, we got drama going on, all right? We've got two armies, two hillsides, and there's a valley in between. And here comes, this guy is almost 10 feet tall. Okay, he's almost 10 feet tall. He's like, I think they say in the translation, he's like 9 foot 9 inches. Okay, big dude. He comes out in between these two armies, and he's got armor on that weighs over 100 pounds, and he challenges anyone. He challenges anyone. He says, "Why should we fight? Come down to me. Pick a man. Come down to me and let him fight with me. And if he kills me, we will be your servants. And if I kill him, then you will be our servants." Okay, now I want to ask you something. Now we know this story. We've probably studied this story in Bible school before, haven't we? We've probably done it. We probably backed it out. I know Peggy and Cindy's probably done this. Let me ask you a question about this. When Goliath did this, was this a show of strength? Was this a show of arrogance? Or was this a strategic move? You ever think about this? Was this a strategic move? You see, you know what Goliath did when he went out there and he said, "Send down one person to fight me"? He just minimized the Israelite army from thousands to one. He minimized the impact of that army, that huge army that the Israelites had, to one person. You ever think about that? I mean, Goliath was a big dude, and And probably any man that went up against him would probably die. But if they fought as two armies together, he may have to fight 20 men at one time. He may have to fight 30 men at one time. But all of a sudden, Goliath, and I think it was a very, he must have had a big brain in that big head of his too. This was a very strategic move. Send one. Send one. And then King Saul, he was allowing Goliath to call the shots, wasn't he? He was allowing Goliath to call the shots of this whole he was the king of the Israelite army. Who cares what Goliath says? But Goliath comes out there and all of a sudden he calls the shots. He's running the show. This is not a battle between these two armies. It's a battle between Goliath and whoever's going to go up against him. And that's where they were. And everybody then, see, this is what Satan loves to do with us. He loves to single us out. This is why church is so important, that we are a body unified together. That army unified together, now I know there's more to the story, but that army unified together, I believe they could have took Goliath. But let's single them out. Let's break it all down. And I want you to think that you're all alone in this. I want you to think that the opposition has you all alone. And you better run and hide. And that's what they did. They ran and hid, didn't they? They were all afraid. Even Saul, he's back. Saul's a pretty big guy. And he's back in his tent. And this is what was going on until David, this teenage shepherd, comes upon the scene. And he can absolutely not believe what he's hearing. And this is what I mean by perspective. This story is so crazy. It's like everybody has one perspective, and then David comes in with a totally different perspective of what's going on. And he cannot believe what's going on. And he talks to some of the soldiers here, and he says, what's going on? And the soldier says, well, have you seen this guy Goliath out there? You see how big he is and all these things about him? And he's saying, if one of us can go up against him and kill him, then they'll be our servants. And even King Saul said that, you know what? The man that goes up against Goliath, I'm going to give him riches. And he's going to, which is good, riches are good. And then the man will be able to marry his daughter, which means that his children will be heirs to the throne, which is pretty cool. But the last thing is best of all. You won't have to ever deal with the IRS again. No taxes! No taxes! And this is where David says, What? What is this? This guy is an uncircumcised Philistine. What do you mean you're even offering prizes to him? He's an uncircumcised Philistine. What did he mean by that? What did David mean when he said that Goliath was an uncircumcised Philistine? Circumcision was a representation of the covenant between God and man. Remember, they made that covenant. Israel made the covenant between God and man. And God said, I will be your God and you will be my people. And you worship me and follow my ways and I will protect you. They were under the circumcision. They were under the protection of God. And you see, that's it. That's the perspective. Because David rolls up on the scene and he's going, who cares how big he is? We're under the protection of God. Who cares about all the details? About how big his spear is and how big his javelin is and his coat of mail. And who cares about all of that? Doesn't matter if he's 30 feet tall. We're under the protection of God. He's the only one there, it seems like, has that perspective. So, everybody else is under this perspective of, It's all about the details. It's all about the details. They place their faith and their fear in the details, and the details is this. Goliath is 10 foot tall. Goliath is a trained soldier. Goliath is wearing 120 pounds of armor. And I'm not. And that's the details, so it's impossible. It's an impossible thing. Kind of reminds me of another story. When we put our faith and fear in the details. It kind of reminds me of that story. Remember the story where there was this woman and this snake having a conversation? Remember that? And the woman said, God said that I can eat of any of these trees in the garden here, but not the one in the midst of the garden, or I'll die. And what did the snake say? The snake said, go ahead. You're not going to die. It's okay. You can eat of that. And he said, look at it. Look how good it is. Look how beautiful this tree is. Look how beautiful this fruit is. God would not make something so beautiful. It's going to cause you to die. So what did she do? What was the words? Now we know that he's saying, hey, you take this fruit and you're going to be like God, and you're going to know the difference between good and evil and all of that. And she had that desire to do that. It was a selfish desire. But what was the last words before she took a bite of that fruit? What did the Bible say? Remember the story? Remember the story? What did he say? She saw the fruit, the details. She saw the fruit was good for food and pleasant to the eyes. So she ate it. She put her faith in the details and not in her covenant with God. We don't do that, do we? Goliath may not have been pleasant to the eyes, but his appearance made the army of Israel believe what they see. And that's where their faith lied. And that's why David walked upon the scene and said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Now, whenever David said that, what's going on here, guys? You're telling me that this guy is taunting and defying the army of the living God? And even Saul is offering prizes for the guy who kills Goliath? Are you kidding me? He's an uncircumcised Philistine. What was he saying when he said that? What was he saying about all the army that was hiding? What he was saying is, you're leaving God completely out of this. Where's your faith? You are of the circumcision. You are leaving God completely out of this. What happens whenever we expose somebody's lack of faith by their actions? We expose somebody's lack of faith by their actions. It doesn't go over very well, does it? Well, it didn't go over very well there either. And where did David end up? He ended up in Saul's tent. He ended up in the king's tent. And the conversation between David and Saul was a little odd, really. Saul was kind of an odd person. And David was trying to convince Saul. He says, I'm going to take this guy. If you guys won't, I'm going to take this guy. I'm going to go out there and I'm just going to kill him. That's what I'm going to do. And what did Saul do? Saul, we know, we have evidence that Saul was pulled right into the same fear of the details. Saul was saying, you can't do this. You're just a young boy, and he's this huge guy, and he's been a soldier since his youth, and you're not going to be able to do this because of all the details. How many times do we do that? That whenever we're faced with a challenge in life, that we put the details of why we can't do it, and we put the details of why we can do it, and we size them up, and then we decide whether we can or whether we can't. Where is the covenant of God when we have that kind of attitude? And that's what David was trying to tell Saul. And it almost seems like that at times David fell into the details thing. He said, well, no, let me tell you, I was a shepherd. I'm a shepherd boy. And there have been bears and lions that have tried to take the sheep, and I have killed them with my bare hands. So I'm able to do this. I'm able to take Goliath on. And Saul goes, lions? Tigers? Bears? Oh my. No, he didn't say that. That's Wizard of Oz thing. But he said, finally Saul said, okay, go after him. And then again, the details. Saul says, well, if you're going to go out there, you're going to put on my armor and you're going to have to do all this. And David says, it's too big. Didn't work. Okay? So finally, it's time for action. Okay, it's time for action. David leads the tent. 1 Samuel 17, 40 through 45. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook. Why 5? I don't know. And he put them in a shepherd's bag, in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand. And he drew near the Philistine. So the Philistine came and began drawing near to David. And the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good looking. So the Philistine said to David, am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks? And that the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. Don't you just love that? Isn't that great stuff? You know, big Goliath, he's like, come over here. You know, I'm gonna kill you. And David says, and again, we catch David's perspective here. It's what I'm trying to get across here, is David's covenant perspective. He's saying, you come to me with your javelin and your sword and all this stuff. I don't care about those details. I come to you with a covenant with my God. I come to you with the Lord of hosts. That's who I come with. And it's just crazy. It seems like David is the only one here that has that perspective. And then it continues. Verse 47. Then all the assembly. Why am I going to do this? Why am I going to lay you out? Why am I going to cut your head off so that everybody can praise me that I'm the great warrior? No, this is why. Then all the assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and He will give you into our hands. Wow. What's he saying there? What is David saying there? He's saying that our God doesn't deliver with the details. Okay? He doesn't deliver with those things. He delivers with the power of God. So it was. Let's continue. So it was when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David. And David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. David didn't slack, did he? David didn't go, oh man, what did I do? This guy is huge once I'm up close to him. He ran toward him because he had the confidence. He had that covenant confidence. Then David put his hand in his bag, took out the stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine in the forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead and he fell on his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword and drew it out of his sheath and killed him. and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that the champion was dead, they fled. He did it! He did it! Why did he do it? How did he do it? He did it because he had a covenant relationship with God. That's why. It had nothing to do with the details. It had nothing to do with who had more of this and who had more of that. And it was because he had a covenant relationship with God and he had faith in that covenant. You know, we may not ever face 10-foot tall warriors in our lives. Hopefully we don't. But we do have Goliaths in our lives. We're faced with huge challenges. We have a huge challenge coming up this week. We've already been working on it. We've worked a lot on it already. But we have a huge challenge coming up this week. It's called Vacation Bible School. Are we up for the challenge? Or does the details control us? Now think about that. Think about that. How many times, and a lot of times, the challenge isn't so much teaching the classes or preparing the food or doing all those things. Most of the time, the greatest challenge is, can I be here? Because you see, I've got all of these details going on in my life. And I've got all these things at Bible school I've got to do. But you know, I got to weigh it out. Now, which one is more important? Which one is? And it's a huge challenge. It's like looking at Goliath out there, and he's 10 foot tall. And so, which do I do? Which do I do? Do we let the details of life control us? And do we approach it with a covenant of details or a covenant of God? I'll tell you right now, it's been a busy week. Last night, about, I don't know, I finally started on a sermon. I had no sermon. And so what do? Don't approach it with, I had every reason. That's why we don't have the YouVersion stuff. That's why I don't have any sermon notes on the screen this morning. That's why I don't have any of that stuff. But you know what? You've heard a sermon this morning. I don't know what kind it was. I don't know if it was good or bad. But we got to approach things in our lives with the covenant of God. And not let the details of life pull us down and control us. Goliath controlled 2 armies there. He called all the shots there before David come upon the scene. Are we going to let life and the things and I'm not going to go there. Are we going to let life control us in that way? What would it look like today to have a covenant perspective in our lives? What would it look like today? Are we David's or are we Saul? Are we David's or are we like the army? You know, it was just a few weeks ago that we talked about Matthew 18 where Jesus said, to enter into the kingdom of heaven, we've got to become like little children. We just got to have that faith. We got to have that childlike faith that if we trust in God, He's going to see us through. Do we do that? Or do we let the details in life control us? So anyway, this morning, as we go into this week, this coming week, I want us to go into it with a covenant relationship. We have been, those of us who have accepted Jesus Christ as our Savior has been circumcised of the heart. We are part of the covenant. And let's approach it with a covenant attitude. And what I want us to do this morning, we're not going to have a closing song. I know Terry's probably picked out something just powerful. But I want us all to come up, and we're going to pray for Bible school. We want to reach people. We want to make memories so that when these kids grow up, they'll know that there was people who cared about them. Cared about them enough to take out time in their lives to build things, to come up with stories, crafts. I want these kids to know that there's people that cares about them so that they can see Jesus in us. And when they raise their families, they know what really matters. What really matters. Come this morning if you will.